Hey everyone, today we are looking at remedies people trusted for centuries, and science finally had to agree.
Turns out, Grandma wasn't guessing. She was basically doing unpaid clinical research. 1. Ginger for nausea. For decades, ginger was treated like the spicy little root your aunt swore by after road trips, bad buffet decisions, and any boat ride that turned a vacation into a sea-based hostage situation. Modern research, annoyingly for the skeptics, says she may have had a point. The strongest evidence is for nausea and vomiting linked to pregnancy, where ginger has shown real benefit. Science, after years of acting like anything handed down in a kitchen automatically belonged in a fairy tale, finally had to admit that this knobby root can actually help settle the stomach. Now, it's not magic, it doesn't get to wear a cape, and it's not a cure-all for every kind of nausea ever invented by the human body. In fact, NCCIH notes that studies on motion sickness have mostly not shown benefit. But still, the fact that ginger works at all is a huge win for everybody who got mocked for carrying tea, chews, or ginger candies like emergency emotional support equipment. Sometimes folk wisdom really was just early science without the lab coat. 2. Honey for coughs. Honey spent centuries being dismissed as sticky peasant syrup, only for research to come along and say, well, actually, the peasants cooked. A small but meaningful body of evidence suggests honey can reduce nighttime coughing in children and help them sleep better when they've got a cold. Cochrane also found honey probably relieves acute cough symptoms more than no treatment, placebo or diphenhydramine, though it may not differ much from dextromethorphan, which is hilarious, because that means one of humanity's most ancient remedies held its own against the modern pharmacy aisle with all its shiny boxes and suspicious berry flavors. Of course, there's a catch, because medicine always loves a footnote. Honey should never be given to infants under 1 year because of the risk of infant botulism. But for older kids, the humble spoonful has actual scientific backing. So yes, your grandmother aggressively pushing honey into tea like she was running an underground clinic may have been doing evidence-based medicine, before evidence-based medicine got a logo, a webinar, and 3 levels of billing codes. 3. Salt water. Nasal rinses. Nothing says ancient remedy quite like voluntarily pouring salt water through your own face. The neti pot sounds less like medicine and more like a punishment invented by a spa run by pirates. And yet, science has grudgingly admitted that saline nasal irrigation can help. NCCIH says there is reasonably good evidence it can be useful for relief of seasonal allergy symptoms, and it may also help with chronic sinus issues and some upper respiratory symptoms. So the weirdest part is not that it works. The weirdest part is that generations of people were correct while looking completely ridiculous over a bathroom sink. There is, however, one extremely important caveat. Use sterile, distilled, or otherwise properly treated water. The FDA warns that ordinary tap water is not safe for nasal rinsing unless it has been appropriately filtered or processed. So this is one of those rare folk remedies where Grandma was right, but modern plumbing still gets a vote. It's a beautiful partnership. Old wisdom, new sanitation, and the universal human dream of breathing through both nostrils like a champion again. 4. Peppermint for digestive problems. For centuries, peppermint was the universal solution to stomach complaints. Feeling bloated? Peppermint. Ate too much at dinner? Peppermint. Accidentally trusted gas station sushi? Definitely peppermint. For a long time, modern medicine treated this advice like it came from the same scientific department as astrology and rubbing crystals on your spleen. But eventually, researchers had to admit something awkward. Peppermint oil actually works, especially for people with irritable bowel syndrome, IBS. Studies have shown that peppermint oil capsules can relax the muscles of the gastrointestinal tract. That's important because IBS often involves painful intestinal spasms, which feel like your stomach is trying to tie itself into decorative knots. Peppermint's active compound, menthol, helps calm those spasms and may reduce bloating and abdominal pain. Several clinical trials have shown significant symptom improvement in IBS patients who took peppermint oil compared to placebo. Of course, this doesn't mean you should chug peppermint extract like a holiday candle. Concentrated peppermint oil needs proper dosing, and too much can cause heartburn or irritation. But the core idea survived scientific testing, which means the after-dinner mint sitting politely on restaurant tables might secretly be the most medically qualified person in the room. 5. Chicken soup. For colds. For years, chicken soup was treated as the culinary version of a hug. Comforting, emotional, and medically useless. Doctors would politely smile when someone said it helped a cold, the same way they smile when a toddler claims their stuffed dinosaur can fix broken bones. But science eventually looked closer and realized something slightly embarrassing. Chicken soup may actually help. Research has shown that chicken soup can have mild anti-inflammatory effects, which may reduce symptoms of upper respiratory infections. The combination of warm broth, vegetables, herbs, and protein creates a mixture that can help keep people hydrated and provide nutrients while the immune system fights a virus. Even the steam from the hot liquid may help loosen nasal mucus, making breathing easier. Scientists studying chicken soup in laboratory settings even found that it may slow the movement of certain immune cells linked to inflammation. That's not exactly superhero-level medicine, but it's a respectable resume for something usually served in a bowl with crackers. In other words, Grandma didn't invent a miracle cure. But she did accidentally design a warm, salty, mildly anti-inflammatory delivery system that helps sick humans survive cold season without dramatically writing their wills. 6. Turmeric for inflammation. Turmeric spent thousands of years in kitchens and traditional medicine cabinets before modern science finally noticed the bright yellow spice wasn't just staining countertops and ruining white shirts. Its key compound, curcumin, has been widely studied for anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. And after years of research, scientists have admitted that turmeric does have real biological effects. Inflammation is involved in many chronic conditions, from arthritis to metabolic disorders, and curcumin appears to influence several pathways in the body that regulate inflammatory responses. Some studies have found that turmeric supplements may help reduce joint pain in people with osteoarthritis, sometimes performing similarly to mild anti-inflammatory medications. That's impressive for something you can also sprinkle on roasted vegetables. But there's a catch, because science always loves a catch. Curcumin is notoriously difficult for the body to absorb on its own. Many supplements now combine it with black pepper extract, which dramatically improves absorption. Without that, your body mostly treats turmeric like a colorful guest that shows up briefly and leaves without paying rent. Still, the verdict is clear. That golden spice sitting quietly in your pantry might actually be doing more medical work than half the decorative vitamins people panic buy every January. 7. Garlic for heart health. Garlic has always had a complicated reputation. On one hand, it makes food taste incredible. On the other hand, it makes your breath smell like you've been wrestling a vampire. For centuries, folk medicine claimed garlic could help protect the heart, improve circulation, and generally keep people healthier. For a long time, modern medicine rolled its eyes. Then researchers started testing it. Garlic contains sulfur compounds, particularly allicin, that appear to influence blood pressure and cholesterol levels. Some clinical studies have shown that garlic supplements can modestly reduce blood pressure in people with hypertension. Other research suggests it may help lower LDL cholesterol levels slightly. These aren't dramatic pharmaceutical-level effects, but they are measurable and real. Garlic may also have mild blood-thinning properties, which could help improve circulation. That's one reason doctors sometimes advise patients to stop high-dose garlic supplements before surgery. Yes, the seasoning on your pasta has enough biological activity to concern surgeons. That's quite a resume for something normally stored next to onions. So, while garlic won't replace heart medication or suddenly transform someone into a marathon runner, science now admits this pungent bulb has been quietly contributing to cardiovascular health for centuries, one aggressively seasoned meal at a time. 8. Oatmeal baths for itchy skin. Few things sound less scientific than sitting in a bathtub full of oatmeal. It sounds less like medical treatment and more like a breakfast accident that got wildly out of control. Yet dermatologists today regularly recommend colloidal oatmeal baths for itchy, irritated skin, and research backs them up. Colloidal oatmeal is simply finely ground oats that dissolve in water. When added to a bath or lotion, these particles form a soothing protective layer on the skin. Oats contain compounds called avenanthramides, which have anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. These substances can help calm irritated skin and reduce itching. That's why oatmeal baths are commonly recommended for conditions like eczema, poison ivy reactions, insect bites, and general skin irritation. The oatmeal helps lock in moisture, restore the skin barrier, and calm inflammation. Essentially, it tells angry skin to relax and stop acting like it just read a hostile email. So yes, people soaking in oat-filled water might look like giant human breakfast bowls, but science confirms the logic. Sometimes the difference between ancient folk remedy and dermatologist-approved treatment is simply whether someone studied it in a lab instead of a farmhouse kitchen. And honestly, if breakfast can fix itchy skin, humanity might finally have a reason to respect oatmeal. 9. Chamomile tea for sleep. Chamomile tea has been the unofficial bedtime beverage of humanity for centuries. Long before sleep apps, white noise machines, and $200 weighted blankets, people simply brewed a cup of chamomile and hoped their brain would finally stop replaying every embarrassing moment since 2007. For a long time, science treated this ritual like a cozy placebo. Nice, harmless, probably useless. Then researchers started examining the plant more closely. Chamomile contains compounds called apigenins, which can bind to certain receptors in the brain associated with relaxation and sleep. In simple terms, these compounds interact with the same neurological system targeted by some anti-anxiety medications, just in a much gentler way. Studies have shown chamomile may help improve sleep quality and reduce symptoms of mild insomnia, particularly in older adults. No, it won't knock you out like prescription sleep medication. Chamomile isn't here to tranquilize you like a zoo veterinarian, but it can slightly calm the nervous system and help people drift toward sleep more easily. So that quiet evening ritual of sipping warm chamomile while pretending tomorrow's responsibilities don't exist? Turns out it wasn't just comforting. It was low-grade neurochemistry happening in a mug. 10. Aloe vera for burns. Aloe vera is the plant equivalent of that calm friend who always shows up during a crisis with ice packs and common sense. For generations, people have snapped open the thick leaves and smeared the gel onto burns, sunburns, and irritated skin. For years, skeptics assumed this was just another leafy myth from the rub-a-plant-on-it school of medicine. Then researchers studied the gel more closely. Aloe vera contains compounds that can help reduce inflammation, moisturize damaged skin, and support wound healing. The gel forms a protective barrier over burns while delivering substances that may stimulate skin repair and collagen production. Studies suggest aloe vera can help accelerate healing of minor burns and reduce redness or irritation from sun exposure. It's not a miracle cure, of course. Severe burns still require proper medical care. A houseplant is not qualified to run an emergency room. But for mild burns, the soothing gel has legitimate biological effects that dermatologists acknowledge, which means that humble, spiky plant sitting quietly on someone's kitchen windowsill may actually be one of the most medically useful roommates a person can have, assuming you don't forget to water it. 11. Prunes for constipation. Prunes have always had a reputation problem. They're basically the food equivalent of admitting you're officially an adult now. Nobody under the age of 40 proudly announces, "You know what I'm craving? Dried plums for digestive efficiency." Yet for generations, people have relied on prunes to help with constipation. And yes, science eventually confirmed the obvious. Prunes are rich in fiber, which helps add bulk to stool and supports normal bowel movement. But that's not the only trick. They also contain sorbitol, a natural sugar alcohol that has a mild laxative effect because it pulls water into the intestines. This combination makes prunes particularly effective at encouraging the digestive system to start doing its job again. Several studies have even found prunes can be more effective than some fiber supplements for improving stool frequency and consistency. Which means the humble dried plum quietly outperformed modern digestive powders that come in containers large enough to store winter supplies. So yes, prunes might not be glamorous. They will never be the star of a trendy smoothie bowl. But when your digestive system decides to go on strike, that wrinkled fruit suddenly becomes the most respected employee in the entire gastrointestinal department. 12. Eucalyptus for congestion. If you've ever inhaled eucalyptus vapor while sick, you probably experienced two things simultaneously: slightly easier breathing and the overwhelming sensation that your sinuses just joined a spa retreat. For centuries, eucalyptus has been used in steam treatments to relieve nasal congestion and coughs. For a long time, this was considered more aromatherapy than medicine, but science eventually gave it a closer look. Eucalyptus leaves contain eucalyptol, a compound known to have anti-inflammatory and mucus-thinning properties. When inhaled as vapor or taken in certain medicinal forms, eucalyptol can help loosen mucus in the airways, making it easier to cough up and clear. Some studies suggest it may also reduce airway inflammation and improve breathing during respiratory infections. That's why eucalyptus oil is often used in vapor rubs, steam inhalations, and certain cough remedies. It doesn't eliminate viruses or magically cure a cold, but it can make breathing less miserable while your immune system handles the real fight. In other words, eucalyptus doesn't defeat illness. It just turns your nose from a clogged highway into something resembling a functioning ventilation system again. 13. Ginger for muscle pain. Ginger already proved useful for nausea, but apparently the root decided that wasn't enough resume material. Researchers eventually discovered ginger may also help reduce muscle soreness after physical activity, which is great news for anyone whose workout routine occasionally ends with them walking like a malfunctioning robot for 2 days. Ginger contains compounds called gingerols and shogalls, which have anti-inflammatory effects in the body. These substances appear to influence inflammatory pathways that contribute to pain and muscle soreness after exercise. Some studies have found that people who consume ginger regularly experience slightly reduced muscle pain following intense physical activity. The effect isn't instant. Ginger doesn't function like a painkiller that flips a switch in the nervous system. Instead, it gradually influences inflammation, meaning its benefits appear when consumed consistently rather than only after the soreness begins. So, while ginger tea or supplements won't magically erase the consequences of leg day, they might reduce the level of regret that arrives the next morning, which is impressive for a root that spent most of human history just trying to survive being grated into stir-fries. 14. Fermented foods. For gut health, before refrigeration existed, humans had 2 options: figure out how to preserve food or accept that dinner would occasionally attempt revenge. Fermentation turned out to be one of the most brilliant solutions. Foods like yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, and kimchi were originally created to keep food from spoiling. But they accidentally did something else too. They introduced beneficial bacteria into the digestive system. These probiotics can support the balance of microorganisms in the gut, which plays a major role in digestion, immune function, and overall health. Scientific research has increasingly shown that certain fermented foods can help maintain or restore healthy gut bacteria. That balance matters because the human digestive system hosts trillions of microbes that influence everything from nutrient absorption to inflammation. When that ecosystem gets disrupted by illness, stress, or antibiotics, fermented foods can help repopulate beneficial bacteria. Now, not every fermented food contains the same helpful microbes, and results vary depending on the product and individual health. But the general principle holds: those sour, tangy foods our ancestors invented to survive winter ended up becoming one of the earliest forms of microbiome management. 15. Clove oil for tooth pain. Before modern dentistry, toothaches were basically medieval horror stories that happened inside your own mouth. People tried everything: alcohol, herbs, questionable prayers, and occasionally just screaming into the void. One remedy that kept appearing across cultures was clove oil. And surprisingly, science says this one actually had a solid reason to exist. Cloves contain eugenol, a compound with natural anesthetic and antibacterial properties. Eugenol can temporarily numb nerve endings in the gums and teeth, which is why clove oil has long been used to relieve dental pain. In fact, dentists themselves have used eugenol-based materials in certain dental treatments for decades. When applied carefully to the affected area, clove oil can dull the pain of a toothache for a short period. It doesn't fix the underlying problem. No plant oil is capable of performing root canals, but it can make the situation more tolerable until proper dental care is available. So while clove oil won't replace a dentist, it did provide one of humanity's earliest forms of emergency dental relief, which, in the pre-dentistry era, probably made it feel like absolute wizardry. 16. Apple cider vinegar. For blood sugar. Apple cider vinegar has spent years living a double life. In health magazines, it's treated like a miracle potion that can fix everything from bad hair days to planetary alignment. In scientific circles, it was long dismissed as the sour liquid equivalent of wishful thinking. But when researchers finally looked at one specific claim, blood sugar control, they found something interesting. Studies suggest that consuming small amounts of apple cider vinegar before or during a meal may help reduce blood sugar spikes, particularly after carbohydrate-heavy foods. The acetic acid in vinegar appears to slow the digestion of starches and improve insulin sensitivity, meaning the body handles glucose a bit more efficiently. This effect has been observed especially in people with insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. Some studies found that taking vinegar before bedtime even slightly improved morning fasting glucose levels. Now, before someone starts drinking vinegar like it's lemonade, there are limits. Vinegar is acidic enough to irritate the throat and damage tooth enamel if consumed excessively. And it's not a replacement for medical treatment. But still, it's impressive that the same ingredient used in salad dressing quietly turned out to have real metabolic effects. 17. Cold compresses for swelling. The cold compress might be the most boring remedy on this entire list. No exotic herbs, no mysterious compounds, just ice. For generations, people have instinctively reached for something cold after bumps, bruises, and minor injuries. And science basically confirmed what humans figured out the moment someone discovered winter. Cold therapy works because low temperatures cause blood vessels to constrict, a process called vasoconstriction. This reduces blood flow to the injured area, helping limit swelling and inflammation. Cold also slows nerve activity, which can temporarily reduce pain. Athletes use ice packs after intense workouts or injuries for exactly this reason. It doesn't heal tissue instantly, but it helps control inflammation during the early stages of injury recovery. The key is moderation. Ice should usually be applied for short periods, often around 10 to 20 minutes at a time, to avoid damaging skin or underlying tissue. Wrapping the ice in cloth prevents frostbite, which would be an incredibly ironic outcome for a treatment meant to help. So yes, the ancient medical breakthrough known as "put something cold on it" turns out to be completely legitimate. 18. Warm compresses for muscle stiffness. If cold compresses are the emergency responders of home remedies, warm compresses are the physical therapists. Heat has been used for centuries to soothe stiff muscles, sore joints, and general body tension. While it sounds simple, almost suspiciously simple, there's solid physiology behind why heat works. Applying warmth to muscles causes blood vessels to dilate, increasing blood flow to the area. This improved circulation helps deliver oxygen and nutrients while removing metabolic waste products that accumulate during muscle fatigue. Heat also relaxes muscle fibers, reducing stiffness and improving flexibility. That's why heating pads, warm baths, and hot compresses often bring relief for chronic muscle tightness or mild joint discomfort. The warmth encourages muscles to loosen instead of staying locked in defensive mode. Of course, timing matters. Heat works best for stiffness and ongoing soreness rather than fresh injuries. Applying heat to a newly swollen injury can sometimes worsen inflammation. That's where cold therapy still holds the title. But for tired muscles that feel like they've been replaced with rusted cables, heat therapy is one of the simplest and most reliable remedies humanity has ever discovered. 19. Yogurt for digestive recovery. For thousands of years, people have eaten yogurt for one simple reason: it tastes good and doesn't spoil quickly. But along the way, traditional medicine also claimed yogurt helped digestion and restored gut health after illness. Modern science eventually stepped in and surprisingly agreed with much of that logic. Yogurt contains live bacterial cultures, often called probiotics, which can help support a healthy balance of microbes in the digestive system. These beneficial bacteria may aid digestion, support immune function, and help restore gut flora after disruptions like antibiotics or gastrointestinal infections. Certain probiotic strains found in yogurt have been studied for their ability to reduce symptoms of diarrhea, particularly antibiotic-associated diarrhea. Others may help people digest lactose more easily, which is good news for anyone who loves dairy but whose stomach disagrees with that decision. Not every yogurt contains the same amount or types of probiotics, of course. Highly processed varieties sometimes lose much of their bacterial content, but traditional fermented yogurt still carries a respectable population of helpful microbes. which means one of humanity's oldest fermented foods accidentally became a biological support team for the digestive system. 20. Licorice root. For sore throats. Licorice root might look like something that belongs in an herbal witch's pantry, but it has been used for throat irritation and cough relief for centuries. Long before throat lozenges filled pharmacy shelves, people brewed licorice root into teas and syrups to calm irritated throats. And modern research suggests there's actually some logic behind that tradition. Licorice root contains compounds with anti-inflammatory and soothing properties. These substances can help coat irritated throat tissue, providing temporary relief from dryness and irritation. Some studies suggest certain licorice compounds may also have mild antimicrobial effects. One preparation called deglycerinated licorice, DGL, removes a compound that can cause side effects while preserving the soothing properties of the root. This version is often used in herbal remedies for digestive or throat irritation. Of course, licorice isn't something to consume in massive amounts. The natural compound glycyrrhizin can affect blood pressure if taken excessively, but in moderate medicinal amounts, licorice root has legitimate soothing effects for sore throats. So, that old herbal tea that tastes vaguely like sweetwood? It turns out it was doing more than just warming your hands. 21. Mustard plasters for chest congestion. Mustard plasters sound like something invented during a time when medical treatment and sandwich preparation were dangerously similar activities. The idea was simple: spread ground mustard on cloth, place it on the chest, and let the heat stimulate circulation. For centuries, people used this remedy to relieve chest congestion and respiratory discomfort. Mustard contains compounds that create a warming sensation on the skin. When applied as a plaster, it stimulates blood flow to the surface tissues, producing heat and mild irritation. This warming effect can sometimes help loosen mucus and create a feeling of easier breathing, especially during colds. Modern medicine doesn't rely heavily on mustard plasters anymore, mostly because we now have more precise treatments. But the underlying principle, using warmth to stimulate circulation and relieve chest tightness, is still valid and used in various therapies today. The key caution is that mustard plasters can be strong. Leaving them on too long may irritate or burn the skin, which turns a folk remedy into an uncomfortable life lesson. Still, for generations of people without pharmacies or inhalers, this spicy chest treatment probably felt like a surprisingly effective respiratory jumpstart. 22. Lemon and honey for sore throats. Few remedies are as universally recommended as warm lemon water with honey. It shows up in kitchens around the world whenever someone starts sounding like they swallowed sandpaper. For years, this mixture lived in the comfortable category of probably just soothing. But when researchers looked at the components individually, the logic started to make sense. Honey, as we already discussed, has antimicrobial and cough-reducing properties. Lemon, meanwhile, brings vitamin C and natural acidity that can help stimulate saliva production and thin mucus. Together, the mixture coats the throat, reduces irritation, and helps loosen congestion. The warm liquid itself also plays a role. Heat increases circulation in throat tissues and can temporarily relax irritated muscles. That's why warm drinks often feel dramatically better than cold ones during a respiratory infection. This combination won't destroy viruses or instantly cure a cold, but it creates a surprisingly effective comfort system for inflamed throat tissue. In other words, that mug of honey and lemon your family insisted on making whenever you sounded like a broken accordion wasn't just emotional support. It was a small, practical piece of chemistry working exactly as intended. 23. Baking soda for heartburn. Baking soda is one of those kitchen ingredients that seems capable of solving nearly every household problem except existential dread. It cleans ovens, removes odors, and apparently also works as an emergency treatment for heartburn. As strange as it sounds, there's straightforward chemistry behind this remedy. Heartburn happens when stomach acid flows upward into the esophagus, creating that unpleasant burning sensation that feels like your chest has developed opinions about your dinner choices. Baking soda, or sodium bicarbonate, is an alkaline compound that neutralizes stomach acid when dissolved in water. When the alkaline bicarbonate meets stomach acid, the two react and temporarily reduce acidity. That's exactly why many commercial antacid tablets contain similar compounds. In fact, baking soda essentially performs the same chemical reaction as several pharmacy antacids, just in a more basic form. Of course, moderation matters. Too much sodium bicarbonate can disrupt electrolyte balance or cause gas buildup, which is not the glamorous ending anyone hopes for after dinner. Still, it's remarkable that the same powder used in cookie recipes also turned out to be a legitimate emergency acid neutralizer. 24. Green tea for oral health. Green tea has been praised for centuries in traditional medicine, often credited with everything from longevity to mental clarity. While some of those claims belong firmly in the category of enthusiastic storytelling, research has confirmed at least one interesting benefit. Green tea may help support oral health. Green tea contains catechins, powerful antioxidants that also have antimicrobial effects. These compounds can help inhibit the growth of certain bacteria responsible for tooth decay and gum disease. Some studies suggest that regular green tea consumption may reduce plaque formation and improve gum health over time. The antibacterial properties of catechins can also contribute to fresher breath by limiting odor-producing bacteria in the mouth. Essentially, green tea creates a slightly less welcoming environment for the microbial squatters responsible for dental problems. Of course, green tea is not a replacement for brushing, flossing, or seeing a dentist. No beverage gets to take over the entire dental hygiene department. But as a supportive habit, it may quietly help reduce bacterial activity in the mouth, which means every cup of green tea might be performing double duty, calming your nerves while also quietly policing your teeth. 25. Capsaicin for pain relief. Capsaicin, the compound that makes chili peppers burn like tiny edible volcanoes, has long been used in folk remedies for pain. At first glance, this sounds completely irrational. If something causes burning pain, why would you apply it to an already painful area? The answer lies in how capsaicin interacts with nerve receptors. Capsaicin activates certain pain receptors called TRPV1 receptors, which initially create a burning sensation. But with repeated exposure, those nerve endings become less responsive and release fewer pain-signaling chemicals. In simpler terms, capsaicin overwhelms pain nerves until they temporarily calm down. That's why modern medicine uses capsaicin in topical creams and patches for conditions like arthritis, nerve pain, and muscle soreness. The first application often produces a warm or burning sensation, which can feel alarming if you weren't expecting it. But after repeated use, the nerves become less sensitive, reducing pain signals in the treated area. So the folk remedy of using chili-based ointments wasn't completely insane after all. It was essentially an early version of nerve signal management, just discovered by someone brave enough to rub peppers on their knees. 26. Ginger for menstrual pain. Ginger apparently refuses to stay in one medical category. After helping nausea and muscle soreness, researchers eventually discovered it may also help reduce menstrual pain. For centuries, traditional medicine recommended ginger tea or powders during painful menstrual cycles, but modern science only recently examined the claim closely. Studies have found that ginger may help reduce the severity of menstrual cramps by influencing inflammatory pathways and prostaglandin production. Prostaglandins are hormone-like substances involved in triggering uterine contractions, which are responsible for much of the discomfort during menstruation. Some clinical trials have shown ginger to be comparable to certain over-the-counter pain medications in reducing menstrual pain intensity when taken at appropriate doses during the early days of a cycle. That's a surprising result for something usually grated into stir-fries. Of course, dosing and consistency matter, and ginger isn't a universal solution for everyone. But the research suggests the root genuinely influences the biological processes behind menstrual cramps, which means the humble kitchen spice quietly built a resume that now includes digestive relief, anti-inflammatory effects, and hormonal pain management. 27. Sunlight for mood. One of the oldest remedies in human history is also the simplest: go outside. Long before psychology textbooks existed, people noticed that sunlight seemed to lift mood, improve energy, and make life feel slightly less like an endless email thread. For centuries, this advice sounded suspiciously obvious. Then science confirmed it. Sunlight triggers several important biological processes. Exposure to natural light helps regulate the body's circadian rhythm, the internal clock that controls sleep and wake cycles. It also stimulates the production of vitamin D, which plays a role in immune health and mood regulation. Most importantly, sunlight influences neurotransmitters like serotonin, which helps stabilize mood and promote feelings of well-being. Lower sunlight exposure, especially during winter months, has been linked to seasonal affective disorder, SAD, a type of depression associated with reduced daylight. Even short daily exposure to natural light can improve alertness, energy, and emotional balance. That's why doctors sometimes recommend light therapy for people experiencing seasonal mood changes. So the ancient advice to step outside, breathe fresh air, and see the sun wasn't just poetic wisdom. It was a biologically sound mental health strategy. Grandma was right again. Which remedy shocked you most? Confess below.